Hilchas Keilim Perik Revi. So we learned in Perik Rishon that a klietz, in order for it to be makabel tumim and atera, is only if it's a makabel. It has a toich. It's able to contain something. Mashenkin pshuti klietz and atera is not makabel tumah, but it's only makabel tumim midrabanan. Here, the Rambam will discuss that pshuti klietz, not all pshuti klietz is makabel tumim midrabanan, only certain pshuti klietz. Now, in the pshuti klietz, Gufa the Rambam gives three agdoras. There could be a metzias of a pshuti klietz which is a mishamish la'adam. A person uses it, for example, a ladder. That's pshuti klietz, which is only mishamish la'adam. Then there's a metzias of a pshuti klietz, which is mishamish la'adam and also lekelim. For example, a table, where a person sits and eats by the table, so he's using the table. The table doesn't have a toich. It's a straight table. But on the other end, he uses it's a mishamshi adam, and it's also mishamshi keilim, because a person puts his plates on the table, he puts his food on the table. So in other words, it's mishamshi adam, not the food really. It's he's mishamshi. He puts the keilim on the table. It's mishamshi adam, and it's also mishamshi keilim. That's a second category. And then there's a category where it's only mishamshi keilim. It's only mishamshi keilim, but in that gufa. In Mishamshi Keilav Gufa, there could be a Mishamshi Keilav, Sai B'Shas Malacha and Sai Shalei B'Shas Malacha, and then there's Mishamshi Keilav only B'Shas Malacha. That's three agdoras that the Rambam is going to say here. Perek Revi. Sholish Midas B'Klietz She'ena Masuyin L'Kabbalah. In the Klietz, which is Ein Masuyin L'Kabbalah, which over there is Dachmanatera, they're not Makabal Tumah, but in that Gufa, there's three Madregas and Klietz, three Midas B'Klietz. Kol Klietz Shu'oshu L'Tashmish Adam Bulvad. It's only used by an Adam and not by his Keilim. Kigein Asulam is Tor. So this Pshuti Klietz is Tor. Ve'eni Mekabel Tuma Klal V'libu Chacham L'Tuma. The Chacham would never marry such a Klietz, which is only Mishamish L'Adam L'Tuma. And V'chol Klietz Ye'osi L'Tashmish Adam L'Tashmish HaKeilim V'Adam. A Klietz, which is again a Klietz which is not a Mekabel. That's mishamish sai kelim and sai adam kigen hashulchan, a table of a tavla or a tray v'amito kiyetzeben is mekabel tuma. They are mekabel tuma. They are kabel tuma midrabanan. U'minayin shein l'tashmish adam v'tashmish kelim. So loshen minayin. Minayin means how do we see? Where do we see that it's l'tashmish adam v'tashmish b'shamshov? Shari miniach hakayres al hashulchan. He puts the plates on the shulchan v'akoises al tavla, and he puts the vice is the tavla was a smaller area, so he wouldn't put large plates there. So he would put the kaisis on the tavla, and v'hamatzois ala mita, and the bedding he puts on the mita. So he sleeps on the mita, he eats on the shulchan. Besides that, he also puts his kelim on the mita and puts his kelim on the shulchan. So that's the first two categories: something that's only mishamish adam, like a ladder, and something that's mishamish adam v'kelav, like a shulchan and a mita. Now v'chol klietz. Ha'asi l'tashmish hakelim b'lvad, a klietz which is only used l'tashmish hakelim. Sha'areu mishamish mishamshi yodam is being mishamshi yodam. The kelim of a person is called mishamshi yodam, and this keli is being mishamshi yodam. So it depends. Im lo yahayu mishamshi hakelim ela b'shas malacha b'lvad. These kelim are only being mishamish. The kelim b'shas malacha is harei Torah miklum. Then it's not tamei at all. And the example is Kigoy Menorah Shalates. You have a Menorah, which on that Menorah has no Keilim in it. It's only something you could put Neiros on it. Neiros are the Keilim that hold the oil and the wick. So you have a Menorah Shalates, which doesn't have a receptacle, and that's Mishamesh Saner. You could put the Neiros on top of that Menorah. So Kigoy Menorah Shalates Mishamesh Saner, and when only B'Shas Adloka. There's no need for the Menorah Shalei B'Shas Adloka. It's not doing anything. So Memela is Mishamesh is hakelim only b'shas hamalacha. Another example of something that's only mishamish the kelim b'shas malacha is v'chan. What's v'chan? Hu keli sheminichin tachas hakelim b'shas malacha, like a tats you would put under a kois. So it's a tetzel. So it's a keli that you put under a kelim b'shas malacha, or v'hatfusim kulam, or molds that you make a keli on the mold. So this mold is only helping a keli to be made. So then that din is, it's since it's only mishamish the keli b'shas malacha, so then it's Torah miklum. That's Torah miklum. So again, let's go again. We have something that only supports an adam, a keli, which is only it's pshutik lietz. which is only mishamshi adam like a ladder, is Torah miklum. Something which is mishamshi of a Keilim only, but it's only a Keilim, b'shas malacha, for example, a menorah, or a mold, or something that supports a Keli, so that also is Torah miklum. B'sheinkin, something that's a Keli, that's mishamshi saya adam, inside the Keilim, for example, a bed or a table, so that's kliyetz is makabel tumah. That's the number one. Now we're learning that also in Keilim, which are mishamish Keilim, but if it's mishamish Keilim also shalei b'shas malacha, it's also makabel tumah. No, nachmal, a Keli, which is mishamish a Keli, if it's mishamish the Keli only b'shas malacha, like a menorah, or a tfus, or a kan, so then it's not makabel tumah. Masha'enkin, if it's a Keli, which is mishamish Keilim, but sai b'shas malacha, sai shalei b'shas malacha, so then it is also mekabel tumah. That's what the Rambam says here. V'imhoye mishamish is hakelim, sai b'shas malacha, and sai shalei b'shas malacha is arezim mekabel tumah. It's mekabel tumah. Now the examples that the Rambam is going to give of which things are considered that it's mishamish is hakelim b'shas malacha and shalei b'shas malacha, and which things are only mishamish b'shas malacha. It's not so clear. There's a lot of diyunim on the achreinim to understand what are these hagdaras exactly. Because the hagdaras that we learned until now is we understand was clear because we're talking about a menorah is only mishamish the neiras b'shas malacha. Now there is a tfus and a kan is only mishamish the keilim b'shas malacha. That's clear. But now we're going to have situations where it's mishamish sai b'shas malacha, sai na b'shas malacha. So he says kigoin kisui hakufza. A kufza is a keli in which you put clothes in. That's a keli you put clothes in. So you cover that kisui. So some people want to say the Ramara brings that b'shas malacha and shalei b'shas malacha means while the kufza has clothes in it, so this kisui is helping the kufza because the kufza right now is doing its work, which is storing the clothes. And this kisui is also on top of this kufza when the kufza is not full. That's what he says. I'm not sure. But I'll call upon one of the examples is kisui hakufza, which is a chest in which you put clothes in, ukiyetzabe. And then the Rambam says, "V'tik hasayif, v'hasakin, v'haremach, v'hamisparayim, v'atar, v'hamikchel, v'hamachtev, u'beis hakeichel." So these all the word tik goes on all of them. Whereas you have a knife, a sword, or a knife, or a spear, or a scissors, or a razor. Mikchel is something which is used in order to dye. A woman uses it to dye her eyes. V'hamachtev is something which you use to write on a tablet, or a beis hakoichel, which means the keli which holds the dye, so you're putting it in a tik, or the tik tavla, skurtia. A tavla is like a little tray, or skurtia is a leather tray. Ubeis hachitzim, a place where you hold the arrows. Ubeis hapaguzes, the place where you hold the larger arrows. The tik chalilim, and the place where you keep the chalil are the flutes. Now, kol elu kiyetzebem, afal pi she'enon elu mishamshe kelim, these are only mishamshe kelim, is nevertheless makabel tumah. Why? Sha'keli tzarich lem b'shas malacha v'shlei b'shas malacha. These are kelim which are needed b'shas malacha v'shlei b'shas malacha. So the rule is very clear that a keli which is needed, sai b'shas malacha and sai shlei b'shas malacha, is makabel tumah. And the examples that we had before where it's only b'shas malacha was also very clear. Masha'enkin over here, when he's saying that these are the things that are needed b'shas malacha, shlei b'shas malacha, you have to understand. For example, when you talk about the sheath that you have the sword in, so l'chura, I mean, while you're shlei b'shas malacha, while you're not using the sakin, that's when you need this keli. Masha'enkin l'chura shlei b'shas malacha, you don't need it. So some people want to say taka that the ikar knech over here is not the b'shas malacha. In other words, the fact that this keli helps the other keli b'shas malacha is not really so negeya. The ikar what's negeya is that it helps shalei b'shas malacha, because shalei b'shas malacha it's like helping the person as well. Basically, I'm not sure, but I'll call upon him. So there's two issues here. First of all, you have to understand how is this working b'shas malacha. Unless you're going to say that when you're doing the malacha, you need to have something that you know that you could put it right back into. I'm not really sure. But these are all the cases where the Rambam says it's called b'shas malacha and shalei b'shas malacha. Also, you have to say that all these cases are talking about l'chura. L'chura, you would say, we have to talk about something that doesn't have a base kibbul. We're talking about something that's made out of wood, That's what the Rambam is talking about, a kli eitz, which is ein asuyin lekabbalah. So normally we would think of a sheath for a knife as a kelis asil kabbalah. You put the knife inside there, and al derez are the other things. L'churi, it's something which is asil kabbalah. You have to have it sear where it's not really asil kabbalah. It's just like a covering. It's a covering for it, and it doesn't really contain anything. In other words, it's made in a way that maybe it doesn't have a bottom. It doesn't have a bottom, so it can't really contain anything. But it's but on the other end, it protects these items when it's covered by these items. I'm not really sure. But I'll call upon this is a list of things which are Keilim, which are Mishamish other Keilim, and it's Sai B'Shas Malacha, Sai Shlei B'Shas Malacha. Avol, now the Rambam has a list of things which are only Mishamish B'Shas Malacha and not Shlei B'Shas Malacha. Avol Kisui Kamtera, which Kamtera is also a Keili, which you keep the begodim in it. And the Kisui Tever, the covering of a box. Or the kisiteni, the covering of a basket, or the hamachbesh shel chorosh. So in other words, you have a carpenter that has some type of a press, that if he has a piece of wood which is not straight, so he presses it together between other two pieces of wood to straighten it out. So the purpose of the machbesh is in order to support the other keli. In other words, the other piece of wood is a keli, and also a keli. It's a keli, it's pshutikli, so but it's also a keli. And you're straightening it out, a machbe shel chorosh, or vakise shetachas akteva, the chair which is under the box, so it's supporting the box, or vahakamten shelo, hakamten is a cover, the cover of this chair, maybe this chair, or vahakoilev sheboin olav tika sefer. A koilev is a certain type of keli, which the tika sefer means the covering of a sefer Torah. So the covering of Sefer Torah, you have to build it on some type of a form. It's like a tfus. It's a keilim, which is a keli. The whole purpose of the keli is to build on it this tikka sefer. So again, so it's a keli which is only mishamshim keli b'shas malacha. Ubeis hanagar, someplace where you hold the nagar is the part of the door where you use to close the door. In other words, the door closer, the door bolt. Or the hamanul, which is a certain part of the lock, which also you put it into a when it's open. So then you take this manul and you put it into a tick, and the hamazuzah also it's a tick, which you're holding a mezuzah in it. Again, we're talking about a tick that doesn't have a klei kibul. Because if it would be a klei kibul, you learned before. We learned before that if you take a shviferes and you put a mezuzah in it, so then it is makabel tumah. So over here we're talking about something which is not a Kabbalah. Somehow or another it's straight, but it's something that's going to be Meshamish Mezuzah, or V'tik Nevolim V'Akinetis, the tick of these type of musical instruments, or V'Hakoilev, which is also a form that you use, the tfus that you use in order to make a mitznefes, V'Hakoilev Shel Goydel Mitznefes, or Tfus Shel Tfilim. The form, the piece of metal, the piece of wood, which you use in order to make the tefillin on top of. The sus shel eitz shel zamar. A zamar is someone that sings, and vice versa, he also like entertains. So you would have like a little something made out of wood that would look somewhat like a horse. That would be called a sus shel eitz, and he would play with it. So this is also something which is in this rishima of things that are not makabel tumah. It's not very clear. Why is this being called something that's mishamish a keli? Which keli is this sus shalates being mishamish? The sus shalates is in itself a keli, which people ask. And Nachamov is or it's a keli, but it's not a keli which is entertaining. The sus shalates shalzamer shemisachken. And also urevias hamikinenis. Hamikinenis is the woman that by a levaya she makes certain noises, which is ma'ir bechi. And like two pieces of wood which she bangs together. So that's also something which is not makabel tumah. Ugnenenes of an oni, if they want to, let's say, make themselves a little cooler, so they take something to fan themselves off. So that's something also which is a keli. But again, you have to understand how does this go into the category of a keli which is mishamish a keli only b'shas malacha. And then usmuche samita. Smuche samita are you have a bed. And then you have like a piece of wood sticking out from one side by the feet of the bed and by the head of the bed. And then you have another piece of wood going across on top these two pieces of wood. and then you have like a certain canopy going over the two, over the bed, to protect the person that's lying in the bed. So these smuchas amita are really just doing something for the bed. In other words, they're being mishamish the bed b'shas hamalacha. So therefore they're called something which is Keilim, which is mishamshim Keilim only b'shas malacha. And v'nakliti amita are also like beams that are supporting the bed. In other words, the bed to be supported. So again, you need it only b'shas when you're functioning as a mita. And also the chamer shetachas amita, which is also some type of a support that you put under a mita. So all of these things, kol elu ki eitzebem tahirim. Why? Mipnei she mishamshi hakelim b'shas malacha b'lvad. These are all mishamshi hakelim b'shas malacha b'lvad. Now really they're taken from the Mishnayos. Mishnayos itself needs to be explained. But I'll call upon him, I don't know exactly the tzir, the tzir. But I'll call upon him, the Rambam has a list. He gives us a list of things. The general rule is that Keilim, that are mishamish other Keilim, sai b'shas malacha and sai shalei b'shas malacha. So they are mekabel tumah. Keilim which are mishamish other Keilim, only b'shas malacha, are not mekabel tumah. That's the rule. Now the examples that the Rambam gives is a little bit, difficult to know. There's pshat in the examples. So let's just go over quickly. That there was the kisya kufza, the covering of this chest, which contained clothes, and then there was the tik, which was the sheath of all these things, the sayif and the sakin and the reimah and the sporayim, the tar, the mikvul, the machtiv, the besak kechel, and then there was the tik of this tavla uskurtia, which was also, he says, is being mishamis shai b'sas malacha and shai shlei b'sas malacha, and also b'sachitza and b'sapaguzes v'tik chalilim. So over there we really don't understand how it's being mishamish b'shas malacha. How is it being mishamish b'shas malacha? L'chor it's being mishamish shlei b'shas malacha. So it wasn't clear to us. And also we have to make sure to understand that we're talking about a tik which doesn't have a kli kibul. It's not osir l'kabbalah, because if it's osir l'kabbalah, so b'chlal, this is not the rule. This whole rule is talking about a kli eitz, which is not osir l'kabbalah, so it's only midrabanan. Pshuti kli eitz is only mekabel tumim midrabanan, so in order to be mekabel tumim midrabanan, it has to be, if it's misham shekeilim, it has to be misham shekeilim, b'shas malacha and shalei b'shas malacha. So that was the list of the things that are mekabel tumah. And then the Rambam gave us a list of the things that aren't mekabel tumah, And the reason for it is, the Rambam said, the Hagdara that the Rambam says is because they are Keilim, which are only Misham Shekeilim B'Shas Malacha. So some of the things were clear to us, and those things that are just supporting the bed, or doing something for the bed, or something that you build the Tikka Sefer on, these other things are very clear, that these Keilim are only being Mishamish Keilim B'Shas Malacha. There was a few things there, we're not sure why they're being called Keilim that are Mishamshim Keilim. For example, the Sushalei Shel Zamar, and the Revias HaMekinenes, and the Ginenes HaOni. So we're not really sure why these are called things that are Keilim, which are Mishamshim Keilim. Halacha Beis, Malbin Hamita. So the Malbin Hamita was something that was a piece of wood. You had a bed. Now that bed, let's assume, was made out of 4 little pieces, little walls around the bed, and that's how it created a bed. Now, Lepeil, to this bed, you added sometimes a malbing. Now, this malbing either could have been added a mamish on the side of the bed, like connected to the bed, or it could be extended on top of the bed. And then if it would be like on top of the bed, it would be like a shtika, like we would have a headboard, and the headboard would be like on top of the bed. It would be like to support, it shouldn't be like in the back of the bed, in the front of the back of the bed where you have your head. Let's see, the pillow shouldn't fall down or whatever. So in the same way, they would have on the side of the bed something that would be called the Malbein Hamita. So it depends. Now, if this Malbein Hamita, the question, how is the Malbein Hamita connected to the bed? So there was a possibility that this Malbein Hamita was a piece of wood, and at the end of the piece of wood, there was like 2 pieces of, let's say, other metal or wood connected to it with, let's say, with certain screws, and that would be called pikois. Pikois would be like buttons, but it would be connected. It was also decorative. This Malbin Amita had decorative purposes. So the purpose of this Malbin Amita, you would put it on the side of the bed as a decoration to the bed, and there would be like pikois, which is like certain buttons sticking out of the bed, and to that button was connected another piece, which with that piece you connected it to the corner. There were like corner beams on each bed, and there was like 4. Let's assume 4 walls of the bed, and each wall, in each corner, there was like a beam that the walls were connected to. So this Malbin Hamita also connected to that beam. It connected to that beam, and Memela Mamish became part of the bed. That's the way I'm understanding the Pshat. Malbin Hamita. If this, you have a Malbin Hamita, which is again, you have a bed. It's not essential for the bed. It's for decorative purposes, or maybe to support that things shouldn't fall out. So as I say, if this Malbin Hamita has pikes, which pikes is like buttons at the end of them, and v'yeshli raglayim shemachabram imamita, and they have raglayim. Now raglayim over here doesn't mean raglayim that go down. Raglayim means they have extensions. This Malbin Hamita has extension, which through that a mamish becomes connected to the bed. So then arizim istamim amita, it becomes an extension of the bed. Shari nesi b'fnei amita, you put it on the side of the bed, on the b'fnei amita, and v'areu ke'echad me'vareh, it's considered part of the limbs of the. In other words, even though it's an additional part, but it became an additional part, which became mamish part of the bed. However, nosnei al shtei l'shenis, you put it on the shtei l'shenis. Now the shtei l'shenis was, as we said, in the corner of the bed, there were like little beams sticking out, and the four sides of the bed attached to those beams. Now, when those beams were sticking upwards, like we have in our bed, sometimes you have like the beam was sticking upwards, so that was like sticking out of the bed. And there's the bed, the mattress of the bed was so high, and then there was in the corners of the bed like pieces that were sticking up higher, and they are called lishonis. They are called the lishonis. So now, when you connect this Malbin Hamita, so you could actually connect it to the wall itself and to the and have pikos and raglayim and its mamish. It doesn't have to be connected to those pieces that are on top of the bed. Masha'en came when you have when you don't really have these pikos and these ragli Hamita. So what happens is that you connect it to those lishonis, those beams that are sticking out, and then you tie it, or you could tie it to them. This is an option. Is nachamo. Nosne al shtei l'shenis, you put it on the two l'shenis, which means the things that are sticking out of the bed on each corner. V'areu govei alamita, so it's not mamish part of the bed, it's over the bed. It's govei alamita, it's higher than the bed. Is aval pishem misuring bechavolim, even though it's tied with ropes to these l'shenis, so the l'chur is very firmly connected to the bed. Since it doesn't have raglayim, in other words, it's not really anything sticking out, so it's not really a be'emes extension of the bed, is therefore Torah. Because this is referred to as being a mishamish of Keilim. It's like a mishamish of the bed while the bed is functioning. Kimal b'nei b'nei Levi, which the Rambam is comparing it to the Mal b'nei b'nei Levi, sheteinu lebehem knirisei muklei asher. There was vices like a setup of the Bnei Levi that they also had something which they had a setup of pieces of wood that was set up in a way that they should be able to hang their klishir on it. So those pieces of wood were pshute kliyates, they were having a function, but their function was only to be mishamish the Keilim. They were only mishamish the Keilim. So memele mishamish Keilim mishas malachim milvad. Kimal b'nei Levi shetelim b'nei knerisei muklei ashir shein tehelim, that they're Torah. And vice to is the Mal b'nei Levi is something that was used while they were using the kineris. In other words, while they were using these musical instruments, there was something that was set up for them to support those musical instruments. They shouldn't have to hold it. And memela, so this is also the misham sheyan kelim b'shas malacha b'lvad. That's vice to is. Halacha Gimel, Machbesh Shel Shakov. Machbesh is a press normally, and Shakov is someone that's a shoemaker, someone that deals with leather and shoes. Shemiteach olav ha'so'er, so he spreads out the oil on this Machbesh. So this Machbesh is Torah. Why? Mipnei, I'm not sure exactly the seer of this Machbesh. Mipnei shemeniach olav ha'so'even b'mokim ha'chokuk sheyeshbei. So Vice is in this Machbesh, there's a place which this is a kliates, it's a kliates, and it has a receptacle for an evan in this kliates, but lepel, this evan is placed into this receptacle, and that's where it remains. There's no reason for the evan to go out. So we said before that when you have a keli which has a clay kibble, but the purpose of the clay kibble is to put something in, and you're not taking it out, like we had before when you gave the smith. So memela, that's not called a clay kibble. That's not called a kliates or a kabbalah. So over here also, this machbesh shel shachav, So he puts the Evan b'mokim achokik sheyesh bei umishamish olav. V'nimtza, so first of all, osui l'shamish is hakelim b'shas malacha. The purpose of this machbesh shel shachav, when does it function? It functions in order to help these oiris, which you're going to make into kelim. So it's only b'shas malacha. And ve'enim is tam mishum kibul ayig natayna. Good, it's takanat, it's a klietz, which is only mishamish kelim b'shas malacha, but l'chura, this klietz is a keli l'kabbalah, so l'chura let it become tamei b'shas mitzat keli l'kabbalah. So we say no. Ve'enim is tam mishum kibul sharei hachakak shebei osil l'smalus b'avin. That place where there's a indentation in it, and therefore it's a kli kabbalah. But a lapel, you're going to put the stone in there, and once you put the stone in there, the stone remains there. There's no reason for the stone to go out. So therefore, that's not called a clay kibul. Halacha dalet. Now, chipuye hamita tohirim. If you have a covering for a mita, vice is a decorative covering for the mita, is tohirim. V'chen kol hachipuyim, all coverings, bein shehoyu shel eitz, shel etzem, shel er, shel matches, is tohirim. There's something that its function is to cover, not to use. And a keli is something which its function is to use for something. Over here, this whole thing is only to cover something that's being used. To cover something that's being used. So since it's only a covering, so that doesn't give it a shivas of a keli, and therefore it's tatum shnemar sheyasim malachibem prat lechipuya kelim. Chipuya kelim doesn't have a din of a keli to be makabel tumah. That's number one. V'chein kli eitz or etzem sheyesh ben beis kibul. So they have a beis kibul. So be'etzem we're talking about a keli which is royal kabel tumah. Aber shetzipon b'matches, and you cover it with matches. So l'chura we're talking about a kli eitz that has a beis kibul, and you're covering with matches, which matches is the mekabel tumah, even pshutikli matches. Nevertheless, it's tehirim ve'im mekabel tumah. So you have a kli eitz nachamol. You have a kli eitz which is a keli. You have a cup. A klietz, which is a cup, and it's covered with metal. It's covered with metal. So the din is this is Torah. Why? Because ma'acher should sipon bitlam. Once you cover the keli, you are mevatel it. In other words, you don't have the keli anymore. You have the tzipui. You don't have the keli anymore. The keli can't be makabel tumah because the keli is covered. Since the keli is covered, so therefore the keli can't be makabel tumah. That's l'chura the pshat. And vatzipui atzmei Torah. The tzipui, I let the tzipui be makabel tumah. Says no. Vatzipui atzmei Torah. The tzipui itself is not makabel tumah. Kamesha b'yarna. So memela it comes out. It's a chiddush of the shitz of the Rambam. The Rambam holds that a keli amitzupa is not makabel tumah. It's not makabel tumah. In other words, even though the keli is royal kabel tumah, but that's when we're talking about a kli kibul. It's royal kabel tumah. But nevertheless, since it has a tzipui, so the keli is not makabel tumah through the tzipui, and the tzipui itself is not makabel tumah because it's only a tzipui. So therefore, it's not makabel tumah. Halacha hey, ha'is a keli, mikzosim and ha'etz, mikzosim and ha'matches. Now we learned that a kli eitz is not makabel tumah if it's a pshuti kli eitz. A matches is makabel tumah even if it's pshuti kli matches. Now if you have a keli which part of it is eitz and part of it is matches, and the question is, do we look at it as a kli eitz and therefore pshuti kli eitz are not makabel tumah, or do we look at it as a kli matches and therefore pshuti kli matches are makabel tumah? So it depends. Im ha'ya ha'etz mishamish ha'matches. If the eitz was being mishamish the matches is makabel tumah, because then it has a din of a kli matches and pshuti kli matches are makabel tumah. But if hoisa matches mishameshes or eitz, so then hakel tor, because since the eitz pshutikli eitz are not makabel tumah, and the matches is the mishamish to the pshutikli eitz, so the male is not makabel tumah. Ketzat mafteach shaleis, you have a key that's made out of wood. In other words, the shaft, the ikra of the key is the main part of the key is made out of eitz, aber v'shinav mimatachas. But on the other hand, the teeth of the key is made out of metal, which the teeth is how you open the door, and the rest of the key is only holding the teeth. But the door is open through the teeth. The lock is open through the teeth. And afilu shein echad, even if there's only one tooth of the teeth of this lock, of this key, that's metal, says areza mikabel tumah, because we're saying the eitz, the wooden shaft of the key, is being mishamish the metal tooth of the key, which is the main part of the key. But fakert hoisehim matechas, the actual key, the shaft of the key, is made out of metal. Or b'shinayim sheli meids, but on the other end, the teeth are made out of wood. So then akil Torah. Why? Because then comes out fakert, that the ikar of the key is wood, and the metal is being mishamish the wood. So the mele is hakil Torah. Halacha Vov. Tabas shel matches, you have a ring made out of metal, so l'chura should be makabel tumah. But v'chisama shel almig, the signet with which you stamp with, that's made out of almig, which is wood. So it's pshutikli eitz. So the din is tamei, that's tamei. Agam l'chura, you could think that since the choisem, knows the ikar is the choisem, and the tabas is only being mishamish the choisem, but the emes is that the tabas is a shem b'fnei atzmi. Since the tabas be'etzem is a shem b'fnei atzmi, in other words, it could be a tabas without the choisem, so therefore it's considered a kli matches and melus mekabel tumah. Now choisem shal almig, if the tabas was made out of almig, and the chisom shal matches, and the signet was made out of metal, is a rezo ene mekabel tumah. Again, because the ikar we go according to the ring and not according to the signet. Again, there would be a svara. I mean, there's an issue in Gemara, what's the ikar of a ring that has a signet? Is the ikar the ring or the ikar the signet? Here the Rambam is saying that to determine whether or not it's considered pshutikli eitz or pshutikli matches, the ring is the determining factor. Even though lepel, the ikar is dochlechur, you could think that the ikar is the signet. We say no. The ikar is the ring. If the ring is metal, so it's makabel tumah, and if the ring is wood, so even if the signet is metal, it's not makabel tumah. Halacha zayin hashen shel matches. If you just have the tooth of a key of metal, or you just have the signet, is mikabel tumah b'fnei atzmei. It's mikabel tumah b'fnei atzmei. Im lei hoya mechubel eitz. So b'negei the choisem, we learned before that if you have the ring that's made out of wood and the signet is made out of metal, so it's not makabel tumah. So if you have the choisem b'fnei atzmei of metal, it's makabel tumah. When the choisem is mechuber le'eitz, so to a ring of eitz is not makabel tumah. But l'chura by the shein shel matches, l'chura that wouldn't apply because the shein shel matches we said fakert that even the eitz is makabel tumah. In other words, when you have the mafteach shel eitz and then you have a shein shel matches, so fakert the eitz becomes bottled to the matches because the ikar is the shein and therefore it's makabel tumah. So l'chura you have to say that the words im lo yehoya mechuber le'eitz is only going on the choisem, which is not so like easy reading. So you have to read like this: hashen shel matches. The shein shel matches is makabel tumah regardless, even if it's alone. Oya choisem is makabel tumah b'fnei atzmei, but the choisem is in lei oya mechubel eitz. This choisem it has to be betnai that it's not mechubel eitz. V'chein hamabed v'hamizra v'hamogiv. It's like a type of large pitchfork, things that have teeth to it that you work with, or v'hamasrik shel reish, or a comb. Shenit la'achas mishineim, that one of its teeth fell out, and va'asa shel matches originally was all made out of wood, and then you went ahead and one of them fell out, and you replaced that one with metal. Is harei elu mekabel tumah, because then it becomes bottled to the metal, and the metal is mekabel tumah. Halacha ches makel she'asa bereishi masmer kimin rimein kedei sheyeches be. You have a stick, and you want to be able to hold it. You want to have to hold the stick, so you put you knocked in a nail on the top of the stick in order to hold the stick with the nail. So the purpose of the nail was to hold the stick. Is eini makabel tumah because the stick is pshutikli eitz, and the nail, which is metal, is to be mishamish the eitz. Now asur, but if you knock the piece of metal into the stick, a nail into the stick, kedei shleitia or oretz echelis eitz. You didn't put it on top; you put it more on the bottom of the stick. And the purpose was that when you put the stick down on the ground, it shouldn't start rotting from the ground. The metal should protect the stick. So since the metal over here is protecting the stick, until now we didn't have this din. Until now we had the din of the purpose, in other words, if the ikar is the metal or if the ikar is the stick. Now we're learning that when the metal is protecting the stick, that also makes the metal into an ikar, and therefore it's makabel tumah. Now v'chein halacha tes v'chein makel shekavel be masmerim kedei lahakos be. You have a stick and you bang the nails into it to punish someone with it as a weapon. So the din is makabel tumah because again shnimtzo eitz mishamish is a matches. The purpose of the wood is being mishamish the matches. In other words, you're hitting someone or something with the metal nails, and you're doing that through the wooden stick. Now, asin lenoi, that's talking about if the purpose was to hurt someone as a weapon, or but asin lenoi, if you banged the nails into a wooden stick as a decoration, is fakert. So now the metal is adorning the wood. Is eini makabel tumah sharei amatches b'shamesh zeitz. Now it's the opposite. The matches, the metal, is now adorning the wood. V'chein menaki shel matches. Menakis is like half pipes of matches. Shekovan b'makel, that you put it onto a stick, a bedelis, or onto a door, and the purpose of it was linoi. The purpose was that it should be decorative. So it's teheris, it's not a keli. V'chein kol kiyetzim is a mishara kelim. Whereas a keli, if it has its own purpose of use, is one thing. But sheiket over here, this matches is being mishamish, is an adornment for a piece of wood, or either for the makel or for the door. So then it's not mekabel tum.